So this is an old book from around the 90s, early 2000s, of a collection of J-fashion photographs of just street fashion at the time. And I remember back in the old school Lolita days, I used to love this book and other similar things because the online community is so much bigger now than it was back in the day. I remember trying to navigate LiveJournal and even trying to use that to like buy old school pieces. I did manage to do it, but it's a lot easier now, and I'm a lot more thankful for the bigger kind of infrastructure we have with the fashion and the whole subculture. But I thought it'd be nice to have a look at some old stuff from back in the day and just be a little bit nostalgic and just maybe even get some old inspiration. Personally, I really like old school, and there's just something about it I like, which may be my rose-tinted glasses, I don't know. But I always just love looking at the old school stuff. So let's go. So all these like little sticky note things are just where I've gone through the book quickly and I've just noted people wearing Lolita fashion or some sort of Lolita adjacent type fashion. And there's probably some notes on there because otherwise I'd be here forever trying to find the specific things. So I chose this first one because she's not particularly wearing, I suppose, the Lolita cord, but if you look at the skirt, it's got a bit of the bell shape and it's got the lace on it. And it's kind of like that era when the fashion wasn't really a solid thing yet. And you'll see people wearing things which look like the fashion, but the silhouette might be a bit different, or maybe something that just doesn't look quite Lolita, but it does. So it's that kind of era. This to me is like a classic old school. It's just compared to like the fashion now, it's so simplistic. There's no print at all. This is like way before OTT Suite or even like prints coming in, and it was like a white blouse and plain tights, and she's normally plain like Mary Jane's in black. And the main difference was the Gothic Lolitas wore black, and the Street Lolitas wore like pinks and pastel colours, and the classics wore like a wine red or something. And the fashion looked a bit more homogeneous in a way because they're without the prints and just focusing on the silhouette. Everything looks so much more similar. Okay, this is probably a bit more leading towards Fairy K type of thing, but again, like you can see that she's got bloomers on, and they've got a kind of petticoat, a little bit of poof type shape, and then there's the lace trim, and of course the rocking horse type shoes. These were all the rage back in the day, and to be honest, I personally still want a pair. I think they can look really nice still. I think they've really timed this piece, especially in this kind of fashion. And I think it's really funny if you look at some of these images, especially back in the day. Chunky heels, big platforms. I don't really see any tea parties or any type of thing yet. I'm not quite sure when they became popular, but for me, I think it was around the late 2000s, 2010s, around the OTT Suite kind of era. I seem to remember seeing them more, but I'm not 100% sure. They may have been around forever and I just never took notice of them. Again, you can see the kind of beginnings of the fashion. So again, with the chunky shoes, the rocking horse style, and like the really cute feminine type dress, but there's no petticoats. The silhouette's quite straight. It looks more like y2k or some sort of casual type thing. But you can see the start of the fashion, and of course, I think she's got the sanitary towel headband type thing, which I like to lovingly call it. So this gives me a kind of gothic Lolita type of vibe, or maybe a more like elegant gothic Lolita EGL type of thing, where the silhouette's a lot more straight, it's more A-line, and it's not the stereotypical shape. Again, maybe you could argue this is a bit more Fairy K with the shorter kind of skirts, but with the frills and all the cute pink. I don't know, it reads a bit more Lolita to me, but this one I think you could argue because I can't tell if they're wearing any headpieces or anything because their heads are covered. And they do have trainers on, which probably isn't really something you see except for maybe in a really casual cord. A lot of people kind of argue over whether it should be in the fashion or not. And personally, I don't really know. I think it can work. It depends on the cord and everything. I'm kind of pretty chilled out about what goes into the fashion. I feel a lot of it depends on personal taste and comfort level. I don't really want it to be like this really gatekeepy fashion. Like, I don't know if anyone remembers a few years ago, there was this whole discourse of, you can't show your knees, oh no, you can't show your knees, oh no. And I think for a lot of taller people, they felt self-conscious about it. I mean, I wouldn't know, I'm like a hobbit, but I feel like stuff like that shouldn't really be a big problem. So this one's interesting because this is when Angelic Pretty was still called Pretty. I don't know if you can see the description there, but the brand is credited as Pretty. So this is a very long time ago, giving me some nostalgic flashbacks there. And you can see that I think she's got a petticoat on, a small one on. It's got a bit of like an A-line shape. You can see bloomers. I can see some hair clips or something. So I feel from a more modern perspective, this looks very simple and understated. You may not even count it as a Lolita cord in the traditional kind of sense. But you have to admit, you can see the start of the fashion coming through at this time. And there are brand pieces. Yeah, but again, I suppose if you look at things like the shoes don't look like something you typically see in the fashion. So again, it's giving me it kind of is, but it kind of isn't type of stance. So here we've got a kind of magical girl, almost kind of inspired cord with, I think it's a Sailor Moon wand type thing. She's had so many magical girl wands, I don't know which one it is. But you can see it's a dress from, I'm not sure, it's from, I don't recognise what the brand name is, so I'm not sure if it's an old brand or maybe it's a brand that never made it out of Japan, I'm not sure. But you can see it's got a cute little cherry print. It's an all over print. It's not, so maybe it's not an exclusively like specific Lolita dress that has the border print type thing. Or again, print wasn't really a big thing yet. And I think all over prints are probably a bit more common because that specific print style wasn't out, but I'm not quite sure. It does look a bit like a early 60s, late 50s kind of type dress, I'm not quite sure. But you can see she's got like a little head kind of some sort of headdress type thing. She's got like headgear on. She's got chunky Mary Jane type shoes on. Very much the kind of quintessential common things you'd see in the fashion. And I kind of love the gloves. The gloves remind me of, you know, like back in the emo times, when everyone had those really like, I guess they were normally fingerless gloves that just covered your arms. They were normally lacy, or sometimes they were like a solid black colour, or there was a stripy or something. But it just reminds you of that time, and those gloves are really popular, and it just reminds you of emos for some reason, and that general edgy time, if you will. Again, this one looks a bit magical girl type inspired. She's like, it might be another Sailor Moon wand, it might be something else, I'm not quite sure. And this one's a lot more cohesive in colour, which I think is maybe a more stereotypical Lolita type thing, like keeping things coordinated and quite samey, matchy-matchy. It's quite of a typical thing, I think, with the fashion. The shoes, like, they're pretty, like, platformy, maybe not so much for the time. You know, it's not an essential thing. And the dress, I think, it was from Emily Temple Cute, which isn't really Lolita. I don't think it's more like a general Atomic A type thing. But a lot of the dresses, I think, can work with the fashion. I haven't personally got anything from them, so I don't really know too much about them. But as you can see, the dress is a bit more A-line. It doesn't really have room for like a big petticoat or anything. But it has that general, just has that vibe. It fits in with the fashion. I think you could do something with it and make it work. It's really interesting to me to see the fashion at this time because the rules hadn't really set in. I think it was a lot more experimental, which I kind of love, but I do appreciate that the fact the rules were in place made it into the subculture it was. I think if it was a bit more free, it would have been a bit harder to cement the subculture and the group and to get it popular and to get the brands going and then to get it overseas. So it's a kind of mixed feeling to me. I miss the kind of experimental era, and I'm glad we're kind of slowly going back towards it. I think more people are being experimental. So hopefully more people are, and hopefully more people will just try. I don't want people to think they have to look like AP clones or just look exactly the same, because the fashions are ultimately about how you want to express yourself within the fashion, and everyone's gonna look a bit different when they do that. Okay, we've got two here. So again, the silhouette isn't quite there. We would normally see the fashion. The shoes are probably nothing like you would see with the fashion today. And she does have a headbow on, and the general vibe is a kind of cute, kind of maybe kind of type of thing. So I think it counts. I think it's a proto-lolita type thing. This is the like typical old school thing I like. I like the plain white tights and the simple white blouse, or maybe it would be a plain black tights and a plain black blouse. I don't know, I love how simple and clean it looks. And this is this is a meta dress, and there is a slight print to it, but compared to prints nowadays, it's like nothing. It might as well be a plain dress. You can barely see anything. It doesn't say where the skirt's from, but to me it looks like something from a vintage shop or something. It looks something that's very thrifted, and that's one thing. It's one thing I miss about the fashion in a way. Back in the day, I think it was a lot more about DIY, and you could easily like thrift things or use vintage pieces, and I think that was more of a thing. And I do miss that about the fashion. I love, I love the brands, I love the prints. I understand not everyone wants to sew, not everyone wants to like try and find things in shops, and everyone can find things in secondhand shops. Not everyone's fortunate enough to have anything near them. But I want the DIY thing to come back. I like I like buying dresses as well. I love buying new prints and things I like. But I think I come from a sewing background as well, so I like to sew my own things. So I have a soft spot for DIY anyway. I don't know. I don't want to say that fashion's more like consumeristic. That's not even a word, is it? That's not the right word for it, but I feel sometimes you can fall into the trap of people being like, look at me, I have all these brands and all these prints, and it's almost like a status symbol type thing. Like, look at me, I can fit into this dress, or I have this like a certain print that's hard to get type of thing. So I don't think we should like get rid of brands or anything, but I think maybe introduce DIY a little bit more back into the fashion. I don't know, I just think it would be nice, but I mean, that's just how I am. And here we can see the classic silhouette coming in. I can't quite read that. I don't think it... No, I can't read the text, so I don't know where anything's from. But you can see like a classic Mary Jane platform shoes. Again, they don't really look like a particular brand. They just look like generic shoes from probably any old shoe place, which I think was more of an old school thing. I think it was a lot more difficult to get shoes. So I think a lot of shoes were basic, whatever, wherever, just kind of shoes. Nothing like particularly like J fashion or anything. And again, this cord's really plain. I don't think there's any print. It's plain white socks. It's just completely plain, really. There isn't even any like head bow or anything. Guess you could argue it's more like a casual type cord, but I think if you wore something like this today, probably would look a bit unfinished, and probably wouldn't count in a way. I think here you can probably really see like the fashion coming through. The petticoats aren't quite like big and poofy yet, but you've got the classic plain tights or socks, you've got some chunky platform shoes, you've got some kind of Mary Janes, two of the three of them have headwear on. And I think they've got, right, so yeah, she's wearing Emily Temple Cute, the dress is from Emily Temple too, and the blouses as well. And the blouse looks very like typical, like Lolita even now, with the Peter Pan type collar, all the frills all over it. And there is a print on this one, but again, it's a simple print and it's an all over print. It's not the typical border print that's really busy that you'd see now. So it to me, it's really interesting how much print has changed. And it wasn't just we had no print and now we have all this print. It was a gradual thing, as fashion's gradual. And over here, I don't think the dresses have any print on, but these are baby dresses. I think she has yeah, I think the dress is from Baby, and here this one's from Meta. So very old school. This like style is just like quintessential old school with having the lace everywhere. And I love this kind of lace where you'd have the lace and you'd have the ribbon weaved through it. I always love that kind of thing. But again, quite simple, very little print. A lot of them, well, some of them might have wigs on, but it seems more like people using their natural hair as well. Which, I mean, people still use natural hair now, but I think, especially when OTT came, remember the split hair twin tail wigs, very popular, and I think using wigs now, it's a bit more of a thing that people do. It's just something about the old school, just very like rough and ready, and just almost punk in a way. It was just, you know, you had to find what you could find, and you just had to make do with what you had. And you know, I'm glad we have so much more now. I don't think we need to go back to the old days where we couldn't find anything and it was so difficult. But there's always something a bit nostalgic seeing these old pictures. Here's like probably more proto-Lolita type thing. It's not really like a petticoat, but it's a cute dress, and it is, I would say it's a very Lolita type blouse, again with the collar and the frills on it. It is, oh, the dress is Jane Marple, which is a brand I haven't heard in a while. I don't know if they're still going or not. I haven't actually bought from them, but I remember back in the day trying to take note of all the brands that sold kind of Lolita adjacent kind of clothing, and I'm sure that was in there somewhere. Yeah, so again, the silhouette isn't like the typical thing, but again, the blouse very much is like what the fashion's like. She does have something on her head, which is very typical of the fashion, and I think the shoes would work now as like a Lolita piece. I think they're very cute, but again, I don't think they're from a particular brand or anything. So again, I think it was, especially with shoes, it was, you had to find what you could find. So here you've got your typical, you've got your Sancho Chow headdress. You've got like, it seems like it's a handmade dress with all these like different fabrics on, which I like. And you've got like a typical Lolita type blouse, and you've got some typical socks you'd see in the fashion. The shoes are probably the most strange thing by like nowadays. I don't think you'd see any shoes like that, and I don't think many people would wear shoes like that nowadays. This is probably my favourite one out of the whole book. It might be the skirt. I have a similar skirt. This, I think, is a skirt from Meta. I have a similar one in pink from Baby, and I think it really takes people back in the day. And to me, this is just, I think personally, I like this kind of style anyway, within the style itself. Yeah, I love the chunky platform shoes. I really could do with a pair of rocking horse shoes myself. And again, I think you could probably still wear this, and people would just say it's just old school. I don't think people like, that's an eater, no. I think this kind of cord would still work nowadays. You know, she's probably not really wearing the Lolita, it's more like a gothic type fashion. I know a few years ago, AP did do mini skirt type things. There are mini skirts out there, but I don't think that would really be considered Lolita. It's just kind of a thing they did. Yeah, like she's got a novelty bag, which I'm not sure. It's from a brand called Patchy, which I'm not sure if that was a brand that ever made it outside of Japan. I'm not sure. But yeah, personally, I just really love it. And again, this probably looks quite out there for the time. If you look at the other ones we've seen, I think this looks the most ostentatious. But even then, the tights are plain. The blouse is like a pretty frilly blouse, but it's still quite understated. She's got some wrist cuffs on, which look pretty simple by nowadays. I mean, the headgear looks quite fancy with all the ruffles on. I don't think you see anything with that kind of shape. I think it might be a hat, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, personally, this one is my favourite. This is probably the kind of thing I would wear if I was doing an old school type cord. These are the kind of pieces I would look out for. But yeah, like I'm interested. Do people like old school? You don't really see it nowadays. Do many people know about it? I wonder, people who get into the fashion now, they probably see the more current stuff, and I wonder, are they more into the prints? Are they more into the silhouette? Do they hate old school? Do they like old school? Do people want it to come back? Do people want it to just stay away? I think personally it's probably, I mean, it has come back a bit. I know some brands have done re-releases, but I think the dresses being printed in a way is what keeps the brands going, because you'd go to a specific brand for a specific print. The thing about just focusing on the silhouette, anyone can make a dress in this silhouette. A lot of people can probably do it themselves really easily, whereas it's a lot harder to even find a nice print, let alone make a dress in a nice print. But personally, I think this is a nice nostalgic look on the time. But also, we do need to move forward. I can't like stay stuck in the past, and I can always put on an old school code if I want to. And I myself, I do like print. Sometimes I like a plain dress, but I do like print personally as well. But if I can find any more skirts like this, I will be getting them, because unfortunately, the skirt I had is so old it is stained now. And I'm considering over dyeing it, because then the stains would be gone. But then it would all be one colour, and I'm not sure, and a lot of things I'm going to think about. So if I ever do try and do it, I'll probably film it, and you can watch the mess and cry with me as I ruin a brand skirt. So that was a nice nostalgic look back into the old school Lolita of back in the day. I think it's really interesting to look at where the fashion was and how it's really evolved, and how the fashion's become really international, and thankfully it's become so much easier to get into. But personally, I'd like to know what you think. What do you think of the fashion, the old school ways? Do you like the old school? Do you hate it? Are you somewhere in between? Would you still wear old school fashion? Would you still wear old school Lolita? Would you want to just put it in the bin? Would you never want to touch it? I'm interested in what people's thoughts are. Okay, I'm gonna go now. Bye.